services around technology around purchasing foreign securities, or stocks or bonds or any type of securities at all. The regulator to look to for that will be SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. So the likes of Bamboo, Chaka, and the rest of them. Then you have, of course, if you're providing sort of like an Uber service for insurance policies that you can just go on your mobile application, insurance policy, then the regulator to look to will be NICOM, right? National Insurance Commission. So, but talking about the body of laws, which is more developed, has released a number of guidelines, around licensing of payment service. You have a number of them. So the way to just sum this up, in order to introduce the topic to you, right? I hope everybody can hear me. If you can hear me, you can just type in the chat that you can hear me.
Yeah.
So I like to.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
But it seems like, can you hear me, Sage? It seems that the video, it's 8 minutes or sort of. So is it possible? Probably just.
So you want me to turn off my video? Okay, that works.
Yeah,
okay.
Maybe.
So.
Okay.
So I think the first way to of fintech, right, is to be able to talk through the transaction. Of course, I am not going to pretend like I am an expert on insurance or the capital market. So I am speaking to the payment system, right, and that's the one that you find commonly, the Flutterwave, the InterSwitch, and all of those. So in the payment system today, for example, Larry goes to ShopRite, and I'm just telling you the different parts and how it works together. Is a customer, he goes to ShopRite. ShopRite in that scenario is a merchant. GTB card, right? That is branded by Visa, right? Visa in that scenario is the card scheme. So the card scheme powers the card, and it is not restricted to bank. A Visa First Bank card, a Visa GTB card. So that's a card scheme, right? So Larry's bank is the issuer, the one who issues the card that Larry is taking to ShopRite, right? And then personalization is the process of putting or printing Larry's name on the card, PIN, and all of those information, which actually makes that particular card, of course, and then 6 digits, which identifies the card to be Larry's card and directly connected to Larry's account. So there is the POS terminal, which is always used for card present transactions. So card into the POS. Usually you have those we call the merchant's bank is, in the technical term of fintech, the acquirer. So who is acquiring ShopRite's business. Basically what that means is that when you pay that POS terminal, it is ShopRite's bank that then collects. So assuming ShopRite's bank is First Bank, is GTB. So what's the instruction you're giving First Bank is to confirm whether, one, you are funded. So on the back end, the processor, basically runs the information, asking whether. So the terminal immediately recognizes, one, with the first 4 digits or 6, it can tell whether. And when you look at your card, all Visa cards, or is it MasterCard, starts with like 5, I think, and I think it's another digit. So you can easily identify what kind of card it is and what bank the card is. That. So there are a lot of things that can that the person can find out whether your account is funded. If your account is funded, then it comes back as approved. account has not been activated for, maybe you haven't corrected your PIN, then you can. So on the back end, Leres Bank, the acquirer, within the settlement, they go collects, or GTB rather, which is the issuer, and then just collects the money for goods that you've just purchased. So in the payment service system, these are all the different parts that plug your processor, like the likes of Flutterwave. Flutterwave, however, would most likely in a card not present transaction. And what does that mean? So when you go on Jumia, for instance, online. So the gateway is the online POS, where you put in your card details and then your password. So the gateway is the online POS, and then confirm the same thing that happens physically. They confirm from your bank whether your card is funded, and then they count or debit you. And at the back end, on the settlement day, they pay the merchants back. Essentially, that is the payment service. And I think in the course of the conversation, we can to other more specific fintech operators. But I mean, I guess, I hope that actually makes the.
Yes, it does. Sage, can you hear me? It seems I cannot hear you. Hello?
I can hear you, Larry, but it seems Sage cannot hear you, but I can hear you.
I'm not sure his network is stable. So Sage, can you hear me now? Okay, while we are waiting for Sage to get back to us, I mean, for his network to be stable, let me just do a recap of what he has said. From what he said the word fintech is just like a kind of a union of two words, that is financial technology. So people use it as fintech. And from that, fintech itself, financial service sector, is wide. So it's not just maybe like certain examples of Flutterwave, where that's just in relation to banking. It transcends that. It goes to issues about insurance, issues about data insecurities, things along that line. So if for instance, if we have a product, we have a product in the financial sector that is probably tech enabled, we can ordinarily refer to that particular product as being a product.
Hello.
Fintech. Yes.
Hi guys. Sorry, I got for a little bit. So, did you have a follow-on question? I heard you speaking.
Yes, I was about asking you questions before the network glitch occurred.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Go on, please.
Yeah. So essentially, from your presentation, I was able to kind of, apart from or understanding the application of the word itself, fintech, also able to identify certain players. So, can you just kind of maybe like list the players in the fintech sector, the financial sector, technology sector? We have the processor. Right. You mentioned processor. We have someone you call the acquirer, things along that line. So, who are the players?
Right. Okay, so great stuff. So the players really, beyond the specific roles that they play, comms companies are one of the players in the fintech space. You have commercial banks, and then you have companies. Now, the roles are then specific. So you can have the likes of role of a super agent. So because the CBN's drive to increase financial inclusion, in 2020, the target was 80%. So you find that you would find a super agent basically is someone who has at least 50 agents under it, and they take financial services, down to the last guy. And so you can have a super agent, which is one. You have a mobile money operator. There's also the non-bank-led MMOs, and they support your agents, right? And they provide mobile money or wallet services. You also have, recently the CBN created a new niche for telecoms banks, and of course, telecoms companies, of course, and they've called that new category payment service banks. But payment service banks would operate in rural areas with at least about 25%, financial inclusion rates. So those payments restricted to rural areas. You also definitely have, like I said, you have your processor. So Flutterwave is a payment processor. You have processor. So they're the ones who confirm, whether your card is whether your account is credited or funded rather, and your details when you put your card, slot it into when you're doing any online transaction, basically. You have service providers. They're the ones who deploy the POS, but the POS, and I think this has come up that, there are people who today have POS terminals in their shops and they're using it to provide financial, or like you can go to them and actually get cash, but I don't know that the regulation. No, they are today are just merchants, or they are not even merchants. They basically just anybody can just go and collect, and then they're using, and they are not agents. So the person's point is that trying to manipulate the system. So it is, a bank can own a POS terminal and can give it to any supermarket, for instance. Now, the supermarket is not an agent, doesn't have any sort of sense with a super agent, but today it is, I don't know what we call it now, like when people say whether you provide what service, I don't know, you want to get money from. So you go to a supermarket, basically, who's not an agent. They're supposed to just use the card, give you value, and then take the value at the end of the settlement period. But essentially, your bank can deploy those POS. So POS in a merchant location, you're supposed to enter into an agreement with a bank, release a POS, and ensure. So you see that POS is tied to a particular bank, right? So you can be a GTB POS or whatever. So those are your acquirers, right? And then you have the issuer. The issuer is the customer's bank, with the branded card, and then the card scheme, they're the ones who support the card infrastructure. So you have Visa, Union Pay, which is a Chinese, and I think has the largest number of users in the world today, of course, because of China's population. And then you have MasterCard as well. Now, beyond all of those, you also have within the new people springing up, which there's basically exactly licensed. There is a new idea that it's the regulatory sandbox. So any fintech startup founder trying to test a product. So it's like a testing environment. You can to the sandbox, and then you can have access to the information which you need to, so maybe technology. So before you roll it out for people to actually start using the service, you can test it, and all of the errors can be corrected. Unlike if you were licensed and you started carrying the CBN's guideline, right? You can be fined, for violating guidelines. So regulations to ensure quality control, that you can, test those products before they are finally released into right? So then, of course, very important, forgot to mention the switches. So a switching company, InterSwitch and CharmSwitch, not very many companies are switching companies, maybe because there is a minimum capital requirement of about 2 billion. So for that reason, very few companies are switch companies. Switching company, essentially, hello?
Yes, I can hear you say.
So a switching company is not a company you cannot do it. Let me explain. So remember I said that if Larry goes to ShopRite and he uses it from ShopRite, and ShopRite banks with GTB. Now GTB is the acquirer, bank is the issuer. Essentially, First Bank, GTB, once it gets the instruction, it's Larry's First Bank, just tells First Bank to pay GTB at the end of the settlement period, which is usually 2, right? Now, but because imagine how many transactions take place in merchant locations in a day. GTB, with all its internal banking processes, may not have maybe the technology or the attention or just reason to follow all of those transactions. So it can decide to then outsource that function to. So the switching company is the one that makes sure that when anybody, or making a transaction at a GTB merchant location. So when you say First Bank pay GTB, the instruction goes to an InterSwitch. So it's InterSwitch to ensure that GTB is paid at the end of the day. So at all merchant locations, it is a switching company that after you give an instruction to pay GTB, it is the one that the central switching company, which is performed by NIBSS, that this is my list of places today and that are due to GTB. So, and all of it from ShopRite was like 1 million naira. So it's a switching company that ensures that First Bank pays GTB, that's 1 million naira. So what naira can decide to perform that function itself, but usually it doesn't have the capacity to do so. So it outsources it to the switching company. So that's what it does as well. Yeah, I think those are the major players. So now you would say, what about the likes of Kuda? So most times Kuda, yes, it's a digital bank, but they have a microfinance license, right? So they still use, yes, they use technology to provide their services, but the CBN doesn't have a separate license. So most digital banks today, are licensed
as microfinance banks. Hello, Sage.
as microfinance banks. So it can be a national microfinance director.
Okay. Okay. Rashid, it seems there is a network issue, or is it my network?
I can hear you, Louis. I can hear you very clearly.
Okay. I think there was just like a lag in between. As I was talking, I couldn't hear him almost immediately. So yeah, Sage, can you hear us? Okay, I'm not sure you can hear us. So I mean, everyone, Sage has mentioned the participants or the players we have in the fintech sector in Nigeria. Rashid, can you hear me? I mean, the video is hanging or something.
I can hear you, Louis.
Okay. So he has mentioned the players that we have in the fintech sector or industry. So we have quite a number of people, a lot of them. We have, and you see that one of the central things is that, I mean, most of the players are not just the traditional persons or players that we know, like banks and all. But we now have people that are kind of technologically inclined that are also delving into it. And if Sage were to be on, the question I wanted to ask him is the issue about regulation. You know, we have someone that is building a tech product, and maybe the tech product has some financial service implication, or I built an application for, say, I built an application for ABC. So, I mean,
Yes, I'm back on, Larry.
Okay. Okay, you're back on. Yes. So yeah, I have quite a number of questions as follow-up questions for you, but we'll just take the two that are kind of immediate. The others can wait to the end of the other people's after the other people have taken their part. So the first question is just, from what you mentioned, we can actually infer that there are a whole lot of people, a lot of players in the fintech sector, and it's a sector that is growing every day. And these players are not just the traditional persons or players that you're familiar with. They're not just the banks, not just the normal persons that are familiar with. We have people building up tech products, trying to make tech, here and there. And the question is, how the regulatory framework itself, you mentioned the CBN, quite all right. But the regulatory framework itself, does it involve the NITDA, for instance, now that deals with information technology? Is there a consolidated regulatory framework that ensures that, apart from you regulating these bodies by virtue of the fact that they are offering financial services, they are tech something to, there are some sort of compliances that they have to make in relation to other regulators? Do we have something of sort in Nigeria?
It is not correct that, just true for every other company in Nigeria, that because you offer financial services, then your sole is the CBN. The point is actually that your primary regulator. CBN. You live in Nigeria, you operate in Nigeria, one of the criticism for regulation in Nigeria is whether fintech companies are being over-regulated. You are a PiggyVest, for instance. When people come on your platform, you collect people's data. Any company at all that is collecting data, already immediately has, which is the Nigerian Information Technology Development Agency, to deal with. So data privacy is definitely one aspect of it, because you're a registered company, and that regulator is NITDA. Because you're a registered company, the other regulator you definitely have to deal with. So everybody as CAC as a company in Nigeria. There are other, depending on what aspect of fintech you're also operating. So if you're a mobile money operator, right, providing USSD services, because you use telecoms mobile network operators infrastructure, then you immediately come under the regulatory Nigeria Communications Commission. That's the NCC.
NCC.
So, exactly.
Yes.
Today, MTN has Momo, First Bank has First Money, Paga, and the rest of them, they are regulated by the NCC as well as the CBN. So, because you're not only offering financial services, you're also, using the telecoms network infrastructure.
Yes.
Those services. So that is definitely a regulator. There are other regulators. If, like I said, goes beyond banking products. So if today you are rendering investment advice or facilitating purchase of securities, that like a Bamboo is regulated by the SEC, and recently SEC just released that guidelines prohibiting licensed capital market operators from entering into partnership with the Bamboo, and you have the SEC to also contend with. And it depends on the right?
Yes.
Of the fintech or the service provided. And that's so as a, whether you're a practitioner or you're an aspiring or you're a student, you should always pay attention to what services, and not by the name the fintech is called. What services does it actually, provide? And to the extent that you also would be dealing, even if you're not primarily regulated by the CBN, to the extent that you're going to the foreign currency inflow, the CBN comes in at some point, right? So today are usually registered, they have offshore companies, offshore parents registered in Delaware or something. And there will definitely always be capital inflow to the Nigerian company. So you have to, start to consider how CCI and the other, and whether it is an eligible transaction. So in at every point. So you just have to know what aspect of this you're advising on.
Mm.
We want to talk about cryptocurrency and blockchain and the rest of it. So
Yes.
I don't know if that answers your question. Yes.
Yes, it does. It does. And thank you very much for that, Sage. And to everyone, I mean, you heard him what he said, and he has been using some terminology, some terms that I believe that, I mean, you ought to have kind of look for a way to jot them down if they are not so clear to you, to seek clarifications. You said CCI, what's CCI? That's a certificate of capital importation. There are certain terms that, and that's one thing about law and tech. You have to familiarize yourself with the technologies used in the industry. And apart from that, you should be someone that you're also ready to learn something about tech. If you are not someone that is tech inclined, you might find it difficult to navigate your way through. So thank you very much for that, Sage. So that will be all for your part until when we are done with the whole session and if persons have questions for you. So thank you very much for taking the first part. So we'll move on to the second panelist now. And that is, from what Sage just said now, you know that one of the major concerns for fintech, or let's just say for fintech, since he spoke on fintech, is about data privacy. Your data, I'm just banking with maybe ABC Bank Limited. They have my data, and then they've told me that I should go for USSD services, or I want to go for card, I want to withdraw. I think I saw a joke on Twitter recently where someone said, she wanted to withdraw, and they said, no, this is the amount of money I can withdraw over the counter, and they're telling you that you use ATM by fire by force. So, and that's really, that's kind of like the implication is that your data is being shared with quite a number of people, the players in that particular sector. So one of the concerns is about your data privacy on the one hand. And on the other hand, we have issues about intellectual property. I've built a product, there's a way I design my product, or there's a way I'm offering my product that I really want to, I want to protect. And that should be one of your concerns as a young practitioner or as an aspiring legal practitioner in Nigeria. Or even if you are not a law person, let me use that term. If you are not a law person, one of the things that you are concerned about is my intellectual property and how I'll be within the purview of the law. So because of that, we'll have the other session on data privacy and intellectual property. And to take that, Maranatha will take that, and Israel will moderate. Israel, are you here? Maranatha, are you ready for us?
Yes, I am.
Well, sorry, I am used to you, Maranatha.
Yes, thank you, Sage. Thank you, Larry.
Okay.
Thank you, Sage. Thank you. Abiel.
Okay.
Larry,
Thank you.
can I go on?
Yes, you can.
Okay. 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 Samuel.
I'm not sure if it's my network or we can't hear Israel clearly.
To be discussed.
Israel, it seems that your network is dragging, sort of.
Is it better? Is it better now?
Yeah, it seems it is. Can you speak again?
Okay. Yeah. The next subject to be discussed is the area of data privacy, and as said before, it's an emerging area, a law that is gaining momentum by the day. And the next person to discuss this on this session will be Samuel Egu, and he'll be taking us through the world of data privacy and protection, especially as it affects us as citizens and lawyers who seek to hone our skills in this area. So Samuel, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Israel. Good evening, everyone, once again. I want to start by saying that we are operating in a world that has been disrupted by emerging technologies in the form of blockchain, artificial intelligence. Can you hear me? Can someone hear me?
I can hear you, Sam. I can hear you.
Come on, we can hear you. Please go on.
Okay, yes. By artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, machine learning, and all that. While Sage was speaking, I paid keen attention, and you can see was often mentioning of processors and all that. Just in that sector recently, I doubt if it's more than 3 months ago, the CBN passed a framework about open banking, where a bank can transfer your data, your information, the information they have in your possession, to a third party, just to facilitate transaction and all that. So all these things operate, and when you look at it, there is this opinion or a contention that something like artificial intelligence, when not properly used, can create racial discrimination and all that. So in order to ensure that the data belonging to you are properly used, the world decided to think out the best way to hold processors and data controllers responsible. And when we are talking about data privacy, so to speak, we are not saying that your data should not be used. What the world is saying is that this data should be used in the best possible way, probably according to the principles stipulated by the regulations. So we have the standard in the form of GDPR, that's the law, the regulation in Europe, which is very well encompassing. And following that, Nigeria too has enacted their own regulation in the form of NDPR, Nigerian Data Protection Regulation, to ensure that the data belonging to Nigerian citizens and those who are not Nigerian citizens that are living in Nigeria are protected, that institutions do not mine our data without our consent, and that even when they have obtained our consent to use this data, that they should not transfer it to another person, to a third party, without our prior knowledge. So there are so many definitions concerning data privacy. Writers, experts have not agreed on one definition, but I would like to pick the one I prefer most, which is that data privacy is all about giving an individual a control over his data, that you should have control over your information, that people should not use your information without your permission, and that even when you have granted permission to individuals to make use of this data, that they should not transfer it to another person or to persons without your knowledge or further consent. So that is the summary of everything data privacy is all about. And in Nigeria, the NDPR has set out principles that every data controller and processor must comply while processing people's data. We have the lawful fairness and transparency purpose, saying that before you can process someone's data, you must have a lawful purpose why you should process that data. You must ask yourself, what do I need to do with this data and all that? So once you have that lawful purpose, which can be consent, that you have obtained the consent of the data subject. It can be based on legal obligation that law has mandated you to transfer this data or something like that. For instance, those that operate in insurance company, yeah, there are instances where they can actually transfer, or even banks self, they can. The law has mandated them to, avail the regulators with certain information belonging to a particular person. Maybe if if they see certain amount of money in your account that is not supposed to be, they can actually alert EFCC and all that. So they can rely on that to transfer or to process your data and all that. They have legitimate interest, maybe because of their business. In order for them to further their business, they need to process that. But their legitimate interest, they must ensure that the interest of the data subject does not outweigh that of their own interest. They can also process your data just to further the performance of a contract you have entered with them, and so a whole lot of them. So for the purpose of controllers and processors who are here, maybe for startups who are here, you cannot underestimate the importance of data privacy if you really want to progress. Just last month or last 2 months, it was all over the news that NITDA filed a fintech organization 5 million naira for breaching data subjects data and something like that. So if you are a startup company, I mean, you have a startup and you are here, or you are not even, let's say you are a law student who are here, you cannot underestimate the importance of data privacy. And the NITDA has set out in the NDPR certain steps you have to take for you to be on the safer side. Before you can commence your business, you have to carry out data impact assessments to determine the effects the data you are processing is going to have on data subjects. If the effect is very high, then it means that you are going to take a proactive step to ensure a high standard protection. So that you also mandated to have privacy policy on your website. If you don't have a website in your office, the need for privacy policy underlines the importance of transparency, because it tells the data subject in earnest what you are doing with his or her data, the purpose, the limitation, the data minimization, the data retention, how long we are going to retain this data and all that, and the security measures you have taken. Can somebody hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Clear.
Okay. Yes. And the security measures you have taken or you will take to protect this data should, in case anything happen. So that's what you must have: data privacy. You must have data. Privacy notice on your website. You are also expected that if you process data of individuals that is up to 1,000, 2,000, you're expected to carry out audits annually. You're supposed to comply with this particular regulation at 15th of every March, but this year's own was shifted to 30th of this month, June. So by 30th, every data controller and processor who hasn't complied will definitely face the wrath of NITDA. So you are to comply with it and then file it with the NITDA to ensure. The essence is the NITDA will look at it and look at your operation and see if you have breached data subjects data or not. So aside that, you're also expected to obtain consent where necessary, and you're expected to have DPO or DPCO. A DPO can be an individual, DPCO can be a law firm. These are people they can be lawyers, they can be tech-oriented people who have undergone some trainings in data privacy. So they will help to tell you how the steps you have to take to comply with NDPR. Sorry? Is someone okay? The steps you have to take to comply with NDPR and all that. They are also expected to conduct annual training with the staff of your institutions to ensure that they are NDPR compliant. So in earnest, this is what data privacy is all about, that a data subject's data has to be processed according to the principles set by NDPR, we have lawful, we have people's principle, we have data minimization, we have accountability, which is majorly placed on the data controller. You have to show that you have really complied with the principles, and that's what the accountability principle is talking about. It's more or less, it's placed a duty of care on the data controller to show that he has really complied with the principles set out in the NDPR. So that is that. Now, talking about intellectual property, just as the whole world is operating or trying to enact laws that will aid digital economy and all that, and then the technology is disrupting everything here and there. It also further brings out the importance of IP. For a startup company, you can't do without intellectual property. Sorry, is somebody referring to me? I can hear some.
No, it's just a distraction. So mute her.
Okay. So you need IP to protect your creative activities and your innovative activities. I don't know what it will look like if you have expended a whole lot of money to conduct a particular research or to build a particular software, and then another person comes from nowhere and, steal or decide to copy the exact of that and then use it. The implication is that you won't be able to recoup the amount you've spent on it, because if for you to recoup what you've spent on that particular work, we will force you to be selling the goods, let's say at 500 naira. The person that copied it from you, who didn't spend anything in doing it, can decide to sell it at 100 naira. And that is to your own detriment and disadvantage. So because of that, the law has created regulations that will guide our intangible efforts. And that is what IP is all about. So you can rely on copyright if you are a startup company to copyright your website content, source code, database, advertisements, and graphical user interface. So to save this, because these are something you've spent money on to create, so someone else should not use it without your permission. So it gives you exclusive rights over these things. So you also have rights in trademark, where you have also made an effort to create a special logo or symbol that will distinguish your good or goods and services from that of others. Other people should not be seen to be using the same logo to confuse customers about your goods. So that you won't have a commercial or economic detriment with respect to the product you've created. So you can take steps to trademark your logo, the logo and name of your software or hardware and all that. So trademark rights accrues to you if you don't register anyway. It's not a problem. You can have your rights in terms of passing off. But the need why it's important for you to register is that registering gives you a prima facie evidence. So it might take you it might be difficult for you to prove passing off. I mean, to show that you started using this product or this logo, symbol, or signature before the other person. But once you register before that person, it shows. Once they go to the register and they see that, oh, you registered before this person, you don't need further proof about that. So we also have trade dress. Trade dress is an aspect of trademark that protects the look and feel of a product and helps to identify the source or the creator source of that product. So you can trademark your website design. You can also trademark the way you place your good in the web page. So this is what trade dress does. Also, I forgot when I was talking about trademark, there is this confusion that always comes up when you've trademarked your name, your business name, then there is this tendency for you to feel that the same rights accrues to your domain name. No, the law says no. when it comes to domain name, it's first come, first serve. And some of you may have heard about cyber squatting. Now, if you've registered your startup name and you've not taken steps to register your domain name, some individuals, they can take steps to go and register the domain name that relates to that your fintech name or your company name, so that if tomorrow you want to register, of course, you would like your business name to be related to your domain name.
Maranatha.
Yes.
Thank you for your very robust discussion on these areas, data privacy and IP. But sadly, we still have other speakers, and apparently we cannot learn it all tonight. But we can't dispute the fact that intellectual property is very pivotal to the discourse at hand. So I think it's just good we leave room for questions, at least the first question on what you have discussed thus far, so that we allow all other panelists to discuss and treat other questions that might come thereafter.
Okay, that's fine. So you also have something like a patent industrial design to rely on.
So Maranatha,
yes.
Sabio, my question now is as to data privacy. Basically, consent is key, but
yes,
I'd like to ask what choice a person has in relation to his data, when in actual fact, most of the privacy policies and agreements on data are on adhesion, like, more like standard form contracts, where it's always a take it or leave it scenario. Most of those privacy policies and agreements always leave the person with, are you accepting it or rejecting it? So I would love you to shed some light on this area.
Yes, that is against data privacy principle. It's possible you might see one, but I doubt if it's very rampant. And if you see anyone like that, you can take steps to report to NITDA, and they will definitely do it. There is nothing like take it or leave it again as far as data privacy is concerned. The consent has to be express and explicit. Yes, that is what the NDPR has said. There is nothing like implied. When you are telling someone take it or leave it, it frowns against the principle of concept, which said that it must be freely given at every material time. So if you are telling me to take it or leave it, then it means I don't have option. So is indirectly you are compelling me, which means I don't still have control over my data. So the concept of consent states that consent must be freely given. And if at any material time it is shown that the individual did not willingly give his or her consent, then such website, such data controller or processor has infringed the provision of NDPR. And of course, appropriate steps should be taken to hold such person responsible and liable. Yes.
Thank you very much, Samuel, on that exposition. So the next discussant will be Emmanuel. Is it Emmanuel? Yeah, Emmanuel Andre. Yeah. And it will be on the necessary agreements with respect to tech and fintech transactions. So we'll be calling on Andre to help us shed more light on that area. Andre.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you to the previous speakers. Actually, I came to speak and I've ended up learning more than I had anticipated. So before I go on, please let me know if my video is interfering with my audio quality, so I turn it off. If it's not, then I'm just going to go ahead and proceed.
It is.
Okay, so I'm going to turn off my video.
No, it's okay with it. So
I don't think your audio quality is affecting your video.
Can turn it on. Can leave it on.
Okay, all right then. So I'm going to be speaking on legal contracts, required in the tech space. The previous speakers have done brilliant in giving us a background on fintech and data protection and all of that. So for most young lawyers, people looking into getting into the field, and also for people that generally practice in the field, the key question is, what type of contracts do we expect whilst working in this field? How properly can we work on those contracts? How do we negotiate and all of that? So I'm going to start with speaking on the contract that typically. Sorry, can you hear me? I think my network.
We lost you for a few seconds.
We can hear you well, Andrew.
Okay, thank you very much. So typically, let's look at it this way. Everyone, there's a lot of talk about fintech. Everybody is talking about fintech, Flutterwave, PayPal, and the likes. So fintech seems to be like the most popular aspect of tech work, but it's not the only part. There's also, like Sage had earlier mentioned, there are a lot of ways in which tech comes into play, and mostly it relates to offering software as a service. So for instance, Zoom that we are currently on, they are currently offering us a technology which enables us to communicate via video calls and chats and the likes. So this is also a software service, and Zoom in itself is a tech company. There are several tech companies, there are apps, there are almost everything, right down to your Apple phone. From when the product is created, there is a series of contracts and licenses that need to be granted for you to be able to say that you're using this phone and you're using it properly. So legal tech work and legal agreements, they are encompassed in a very broad range. So if you want to be able to say that you're working in that space, it's very important that you always have like an idea in your head, and then you can always recognize a contract when you see one or when you're required to draft one. So I'm going to take it from the startup phase. I'm going to start with startups. Now, Nigeria is a budding tech society. And the first thing I'd like to point out is a lot of tech guys. They always say think they can innovate around tech. Tech guys, they feel like there's a way we can do this. We don't have to go through the legal hassle of getting a lawyer and all of that. But eventually, they always come back to the fact that you cannot innovate around legal services. You need someone to draft your contracts. You need someone to help with regulatory compliance and the likes. And this is where lawyers come in. For a typical tech contract, for a typical tech company, let's say a startup would primarily require a founder's agreement or a shareholder's agreement. Something for law school students, you might have come across a promoter's contract. So these are all the same thing. Basically, you need an agreement that determines the founding stage, how the company, the founders are going to interact with each other, how they're going to operate and negotiate and the likes. So you always need a founder's agreement. A founder's agreement is very key because it determines almost always everything, profit sharing and the likes. After a founder's contract, you also need things like an investor's agreement if you're looking to get investors into your company. If, say, when Flutterwave did a Series A or a Series B, what would that normally regulate the means in which they transacted in that period would be their investor's agreement. So your investor's agreement will tell you, okay, this is what you're getting in exchange for your equity and all of that. There's also the need for employment contracts. Employment contracts are almost always key, especially for startups, because you see startups, you want to build an app, you want to innovate a technology. You don't quite have the money in the beginning to say, oh, I need a lawyer, I'll pay you. Oh, okay, I need a UI, UX designer, I'll pay you. Oh, I need a graphics designer, I'll pay you. You don't have that money. And so a lot of tech company, what they do is they offer equity in their company. They say, oh, okay, take 10%, take 20 and all of that. And then this usually translates into an issue when, say, for instance, you want to get an investor into your company and you find out that you don't have enough shares left to be unissued, or you already have so many shareholders that AGMs and meetings and decision makings has become a strenuous process, or you find out that it's much, an investor comes in, an investor wants 80% of your company for over $80 million, and you are the owner, but you only have 200%. You would have doled out incomes, percentages of the shares in the company to other people in exchange for services. While this may not be bad, it's always very good that you have an employer's contract that regulates the way that you do these things, the way that you say, you can say take 10%, take 20%. The primary example would be Facebook. When Facebook first started, I think there was a pizza delivery lady guy. I think there was also their cleaner, the lady that cleaned for them, their building, their apartment studio where they began. They offered the lady shares in the company, maybe as a joke.
That's Google.
Okay, sorry, that's Google. Thank you. I was mixing it up. And those shares are worth so much more today. So for this type of things, you always want to have your employment contract, which states that, okay, this is what you want. Because if in future an employee wants to leave the company and an employee has shares in the company, these things, the legal ramifications, they are not something that you can easily predict. And so it's always important that you can define the scope in which you do that within the company. There's also a need for confidentiality agreements. These are very key. Non-circumvention and non-disclosure agreements are always very key for startups. You want to be able to speak to people and know that your secrets will be kept in. You don't want to have a pitch meeting and the product that you've pitched in 2 weeks, you find that the person you pitched it to is able to have produced that product, had the capital and everything else, and so went ahead to produce the product without you. So you want to have an NDA and an NCNDA. That's a non-circumvention and non-disclosure agreement within you. There's also, if you want to go into partnerships, then you might want a joint venture agreement or partnership agreements. Also, of course, as a tech company, as a company that deals with data and all of that, your privacy policy is also very key, especially when you're creating a software or a product that is going to be used by multiple people. I believe it was covered in the data protection aspect of this. You always want to have your privacy policy, which inundates people on this is how you do, this is how we handle your data, we'll keep your data a secret, this is what we're doing with your data. A confidentiality agreement, most tech companies will say, oh, okay, we have a confidentiality agreement which says we can't use your data, but that doesn't cover for data. Actually, it also only covers for information. So privacy policies are distinct. A lot of companies that are currently operating, they do not have privacy policies, and these will come into play when NITDA begins to enforce. And so the one thing I always say is that tech is probably the new oil. So eventually you're going to have a lot of regulators in the space, and you're going to have a lot of companies spring up. So for every startup, you always want to make sure that your legal documents are in check. So if as a lawyer, you have been approached, a startup has approached you, or you've been assigned, or you've been told, okay, this startup, what does this startup need? So the basic things that should come into your head are the founders agreements, investors agreements, employment contracts, the JVAs, the NCNDAs, and all of that. So those are key for almost every startup. Now, if say a tech company is already fully blossomed and it's working, and you have a compliance rule, legal compliance and all of that, you want to, if you have basic transaction experience or contract drafting experience, then you can thrive, you can survive. But also it's very important that you consider that tech contracts are quite distinct from normal commercial contracts. Let's say the most popular will be a terms and condition. A lot of terms and conditions. I know that people almost always skip terms and conditions because it's too long, it's too bulky and all of that. But there are people, as a tech lawyer, that terms and condition, that's your ballpark, that's where you play, because it is left within you to draft. The terms and condition basically is how you regulate the software or the tech products that your clients, the tech companies have is giving out. So you want to look at tech. I always say, if you want to start into tech, then take out time and read Twitter's terms and conditions. It's bulky, it's long, it has a lot of facets, but read it, understand it. By the time you've done that, it gives you, you're well positioned, you understand what tech contracts are. There are also things like, so I want to point out that for tech companies, what they almost always offer is software licenses. They I would go, let me see the most basic example. Say for instance, Twitter. Twitter is a company, and Twitter has developed a product. The software product is Twitter, the Twitter app and everything within it. So for you to use the Twitter app, you have to sign, they have to license it to you. They have to give you a license for you to be able to operate on the Twitter app. It belongs to Twitter, it belongs to Jack. Jack will license it to you. You will then be able to use it. So now, for you to be able to use those licenses, there are several, for you to be able to use the app, there are several licenses that you have to go through. You have to be able to say, oh, okay, if I put out a content here, it belongs to me, but it also belongs to Twitter. Twitter can use it. This is so that you won't come and put out a tweet and then you want to claim copyrights later for the tweet, and Twitter cannot use it. So Twitter always has that policy. So there's also for the much less popular ones, there are also softwares that are more practical in use. Let's say something like Accelerex, a company, they grant you a software that lets you interface with your ATM card so that when you plug in your ATM to the POS, it works. So that's a software. In those instances, what you need is a software as a service agreement. These are quite common and a lot of people always almost need it. That, okay, we need a software as a service agreement to be able to transact and all of that. So those SAS agreements, those are things that a lawyer in the tech space will almost always dabble with. So in terms of legal drafting, it's important that you are grounded in IP. Intellectual property is very important. It's also important that you have a fair knowledge of data protection for you to be able to be a competent legal lawyer and for you to draft agreements. You also want to remember as a lawyer that your space, you also want to remember as a lawyer that the space that you're in, people don't necessarily have time to read too lengthy documents. So you want to keep your contract drafting language precise and always available so that people can easily reach out to it and act on it and say, this is what we are doing. Your terms, your drafting, your terminologies, you have to make sure that your contracts are very, very proper. Also, it's also important that you remember when you're drafting your contracts that more often than not, software contracts, tech contracts are open source contracts. So you're drafting one contract that will be used by several parties. So for those several parties, you have to make sure that when you're drafting, you anticipate scenarios that might happen. What would happen for party A might not happen for party B. So you want to make sure that your contract drafting is as open as possible. And then you also want to look at the different types of software license agreements, because almost every type of tech contract, they fall into software license agreements. You know, there are use-only agreements, there are click-wrap agreements, there are shrink-wrap agreements, produce and sell agreements, software escrow agreements. I think Twitter uses the click-wrap agreements, click-wrap license type agreement. So whenever you click it, you will see it. There's also shrink wrap. Those are those condensed terms and conditions that are very tiny, but they regulate the entire usage of those portfolios. So at the end of the day, if I want to round it up here, so tech drafting, tech contracts, they are pretty much similar to ordinary commercial contracts, but they differ in their very nature. It is intrinsic that you understand that what you're offering, this is different from somebody buying a car. So you can just draft a purchase agreement. More often than not, tech platforms, tech softwares, licenses are inalienable, copyright is inalienable. So more often than not, it's always the license that is being granted. You want to look at what type of license is being granted, how long, how exhaustible, and all of that, the terms and conditions for all of this drafting. I know I'm time constrained, so I'm going to try and wrap it up. I do want to say that the most primary thing when it comes to tech contracts, there are always a lot of open source materials on the internet for you to use. But the most important thing that you should remember when you're drafting a tech contract is this is a different type of contract. It is new, it is novel, and people want to be able to transact with contracts that are not so difficult. They don't want to be reading things that they don't understand. So if you're a tech contract, if you've been approached to draft tech contracts, always make sure that your contract drafting language is easy and it's accessible. And tech contracts don't give a lot of room for rigmarole in terms of there are always standard forms and procedures. So you may almost always want to seek reference and do your proper research before you begin drafting. You don't want to assume that this is this and that is that, and then you miss a slight technicality that will cost your clients billions or millions in the nearest future. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for that robust discussion, Andre. Very, very insightful and enlightening in every truth of the word. So the question with respect to what you have discussed thus far is, we'd like you to share snippets or takeaways on the guides on drafting and reviewing tech-related agreements. Especially when there are contracts having boilerplates, clauses, and what have you. So, what are those very key clauses to include in tech-related agreements when advising either of the parties?
Hello, Andre, we can hear you.
Did you get me? Did you get me?
Yes, I heard you, Israel, but I'm not sure Emmanuel heard you. Emmanuel, can you hear us?
Andre, did you hear me?
Okay. Please, if you can hear me, if there are any questions, please send it to the chat and then I'll take it up until the moderators are able to.
No, Andre, let me go over it again. Andre, can you hear me? Andre?
Also, I do want to point out that you can always reach out to me if you need help, basic guidelines in drafting. If you've been approached and you want sample documents, as much as I can share, I will be willing to share. So you can always reach out to me on Instagram or LinkedIn, Twitter too.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel. Can you hear me? Can you hear us? Emmanuel.
It's possible that probably his audio has gotten cut off, so he might be speaking, but he can't hear us. So what we can do is probably the AirPods are disconnected, exactly. So maybe we should just move on to the next person. We'll take his questions when we are done.
Okay. So yeah, thus far, we've had a very insightful session. We've listened to 3 persons. We've listened to persons talking on, Sage speaking to fintech, and from there we delved into PD, that's data privacy, and then we have now spoken about legal documentations, and all the discussion so far. You agree with me that it has just been law and tech. So there is a need for us to know what is in between, just like the tag or the name of this session, law, tech, and everything between. So what is between law and tech? What are the other considerations? So for that part, we have Zikora speaking to us on what are the other considerations basically. So Zikora, if you're on the call, kindly confirm if you're on the call.
Yes, I'm on the call.
Okay, so you may proceed to speak to us on the things in between law and tech.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. I've learned a lot. I didn't expect to learn this much, a lot from this session. Sage has spoken mostly on the technicalities of fintech and a lot of the back end, and Maranatha covered data privacy and all of that. Andre talked about software as a service business, and he covered most of what I will speak about, but I'll still go ahead and speak about it because, in the spirit of we move. But I have
we have to move. We want to learn from you.
Okay. I have a slide, yes, so I'm going to share it now.
Okay.
So I'm going to share my screen. I'm trying to do that, okay. I've selected, can you see my screen?
Yes, I think I can, but it's not a slide mode yet. So I can see the first slide.
I'm coming.
Yes.
I'm coming, please. I'm trying to do that now. So I'm coming. Let me open that. Just 1 minute, okay? 1 single minute. Don't worry. Can you see me? Sorry, I'm coming, please. Just give me 1 minute and I'll understand what I'm doing. Can you hear me still?
Yes, I can hear you.
Just give me 1 minute. I want to move from that because a lot of my stuff is shared there. Keynotes. I'm looking. Just give me a minute, please, guys.
Okay.
Keynote open. Don't mind me. I've never actually shared screen for some reason on what's it called?
On Zoom.
I've never actually shared my screen on Zoom, but it's always Google Meets. So yes, I think this is
Using your laptop or you're using your phone.
I think I could see your screen. If you can share it again.
I
Can you
could
see
see
the screen now?
but it was not in a slide mode.
Or in the alternative, if you can send it to me, probably my email or my WhatsApp, immediately I can share it for you.
I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to share. Don't worry.
Okay.
Okay, so Zoom meeting. I'm here. So let me see if I can share my screen. Can you see me now?
Yes, we can. I can see your screen. I'm checking for myself now.
You can see it now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to, oh God, it's not moving now. Okay, so I think I figured out how to do it. So yes, are we here yet? Are we still here?
Well, with you, Zikora, please go on.
Can I see my screen, yes?
Yes, I can.
Yes, we can see.
So thank you very much. So my name is Zikora. Good evening, and I'm going to talk about the role of lawyers in tech. Now, I did not know whether to choose tech or startup. There are a lot of ways to choose it, and as I said, most of the other speakers have covered a lot of stuff. So I think I'll just go on. My name is, as I said, Zikora Okowewan. I'm a lawyer, and I've worked for tech startups across Africa, and I still work for a lot of them. And the Middle East, the US, and the UK. I've done Canada too. And I think I've done Germany, across fintech, health tech, and edutech mostly. So I will try to not focus so much on fintech, on health tech, on edutech. I'm just trying to like spread around and make sure that I cover as many stuff as much as possible. But first, we shoot all the lawyers. So if you're a lawyer, get ready.
Okay.
A lot of startups generally don't like lawyers for a lot of reasons. And one of them is cost. One of them is that they can't figure out exactly what a lawyer does. Some of them, they say, I can do it. I know the CAC website and I'm a tech bro. So I know how to incorporate companies on my own and all of that. So why exactly does a lawyer, where does the lawyer come? On the question of cost, it's usually a question of value, not actually about how much is paid. So startups sometimes, or people that are doing business will want to pay you, but they really want commensurate value in return. So if you're working for a startup, you should look out to provide value as much as is possible. So you do it yourself. People talk about what exactly does a lawyer do. You should be able to explain in tangible terms what you bring to the table. It's good for you to explain it in denominations. So I will be able to save you 40 million if I work with you over a 6-month period. And this is exactly how I will do that. Something else I'm going to tell you is that clients that pay you money don't put you through that thing. I'm going to be serious. Most of my paying clients, I have a meeting with them. We look at their business. We do an audit of your business and they just pay. And I don't have to do, if I have to do all those back and forth, I generally assume that you don't have money. So I'm going to wait till you hustle and raise your money and come and pay my fees. But as much as possible, I try to communicate value as much as possible in denominations. So I try to distinguish between some things. When people talk about tech and when people talk about startups, they sort of mix everything together. And when people talk about legal tech and technology and tech law, these things mean different things. Now, I'll try to explain. Tech usually refers to technology or the ecosystem or a number of startups, Abby, powered by technology who are interconnected by industry or geography. So they say Yaba Tech and Yaba Tech ecosystem and all of that. The tech is actually the technology itself. Now, in technology spreads around different things depending on industry and depending on what you're talking about. There's oil technology, there's education technology, there is technology for a lot of things. So what exactly do lawyers do in technology? Now, not in startups, in technology. If you're working with people that are not providing software as a service, as Andre has explained, if you're working with a company that provides hardware tech, what exactly is the role of a lawyer in the company like that? Lawyers actually look at stuff like ethics. Lawyers look at dispute resolution between participants in the industries. Lawyers look at intellectual property. They look at lobbying, government regulations. Lawyers also look at stuff I talked about, intellectual property, data privacy, a lot of these things. That is the job of lawyers in tech, outside startups. Now, startup on the other side, a startup is a company that is undertaken by an entrepreneur to seek and validate a scalable business model. Something I did not explain. I think I explained. Startups are usually intend to, that's to not P, the P is not supposed to be there, to disrupt existing industries or by innovation or to create a new industry. Disrupting an existing industry, what fintechs are doing with banking. Fintechs are actually disrupting the traditional financial industry. And to create new industries, Facebook created social media and all of that. Now, take note, a startup is not an SME. Although the requirements of the both remain similar, if you have the fact that a startup is not an SME in the back of your mind, you will understand why. Let me give you an example. Facebook started 12 years ago. At the time that Facebook started, Facebook was a startup for a few years. And after 12 years, Facebook is no longer a startup, but Facebook is a multi-billion dollar company. No SME that started 12 years ago or 13 years ago, or whenever it is that Facebook started, no SME is at that size at this time. Startups are built to scale. That's the key thing. Startups are built to scale. So there's a business model, but the main idea of the business model is to scale. And so whenever a startup contracts you and say, come and do legal services for us, have that at the back of your mind while you are meeting with them. I'll give you another example. Apple started in the same year as Dangote Industries, side by side. Apple's first raise was $250,000. Dangote's first raise in 1976 was $500,000, double of what Apple raised. A lot of years later, today, Apple is a $2 trillion company. And Dangote is still struggling between 13 billion and 8 billion. Startups are not SMEs. You need to know this difference because a lot of times when lawyers begin to work for startups, they don't realize that you are moving at a 10 times pace than what an SME lawyer is doing. So you should look 10 years ahead and run at that pace. So what do lawyers do in startups then? The role of a lawyer is usually determined by a number of things. Number one, what stage is the startup at? Is it pre-seed? Is it at seed? Is it raising Series A? Is it an older startup? Is it at exit? At what stage did you join it? If it's at exit, what kind of exit? Is it an IPO? Is it an acquisition? Is it a merger? All of that. It will determine the role that you play. What industry is it in? Is it an edutech startup, in which case you have different rules? Is it a health startup? Is it a financial startup? There are a lot of types of startup. What is it? And I will explain when I talk about incorporation, why this information is very important. And then what kind of product does it make if it's a startup? I know that when I was talking about the differences in words, legal tech and tech law, I didn't differentiate them. Legal tech is technology that enables legal services. So firm management software that is used to draft, filing software, CRM software, that's legal tech. When you're talking about tech law, you're talking about the body of laws that guide tech technology, that body technology, including companies that make use of technology. So I think it was very important that I pointed out that. So yes, I was talking about the roles of lawyers. One of the roles of lawyers is incorporation. Yes, it's very easy to assume that everybody knows what incorporation is, and we go on what is it called, and CAC website, and we just started doing incorporation. I think that was my first year as a law. As an aside, I did not, my law practice, my law career started in a dispute resolution firm, like a firm that does strictly dispute resolution. And then I started working for myself for a long time. Then I'm working on setting up a firm soon. But the thing is, I remember that when I started, I really wanted to do this. I learned how to do this. I knew how to do this. I was already doing this internationally. I was not doing it locally then, but I didn't know how to explain what I was doing to people. So I'll say I want to do, people come to me, oh, I want to incorporate. And I'm like, okay, this is how much I'll charge you. And they'll say, why are you charging me that much? And the other person said 50,000. I'll say, go to that person. When they go to that person and they incorporate at 50,000, I will ignore them. After like 1 year, I'll keep the relationship open. I'll keep communication open. After like 1 year, they'll call me. I want to do this. I'll say, you see that amount I charged you that last time that you skimped? I went and paid 50K. You pay it now. Bring the money. And this is why. In incorporation, if you're incorporating a company, as I said, startups, you're supposed to think years ahead. If you're incorporating a startup, you are looking at the industry that it's at. You're looking at the licenses that it needs for that industry. You're looking at the registrations that it needs for that industry. You're looking at regulations generally, and you are incorporating it in such a way that you will not have problems with those regulations. I'll use a fintech company, for example. If you're getting a fintech company and you're going to register a fintech company, what area of fintech are they in? Are they in insurtech? Are they in payments? Are they in remittances? What exactly are they doing? Are they a loan company? Whatever they are doing, it's now determining the licenses that they need. Do they need a banking license? Do they need an IMTO license? Do they need a money lender's license? If they need these things, what are the number of shares that are required for these things? For example, if you're going to do a money lender's license in Lagos, you need 10 million share capital. If you're going to do a financial services company in cooperation with CAC based on their new rules of last year, you need 25 million shares. For example, if they are going to do legal advisory, they need 100 million shares. You need to know these things, and you need to be able to work with your clients in such a way that we'll explain for me to be able to enable your services on the regulation front. We need to do this now. These are the taxes that we need to incorporate now. These are the reasons why we need to do these things now. Now, are there pre-incorporation requirements that you need for the companies? There are certain sectors that you need certain pre-incorporation stuff to put in. Nothing comes to mind now. Oh God, I remembered something this afternoon, but I don't remember it now. I'll remember it I'll say it if I remember it later. Now, if there are pre-incorporation requirements, you have to meet with those pre-incorporation requirements before you go for incorporation, so that the moment you're incorporating, you already know what you're doing. Now, for example, I think there's a pre-incorporation requirement for banks. I'll remember it. I'll tell you when I remember it. I don't remember right now. So documentation and foundational contracts. These are some of the things that lawyers will do for their startup. Now, there's partnership contracts, there's founders agreements, there is confidentiality agreements or NDAs. A lot of lawyers do HR and employment services for their clients. We do tax. So you're doing a lot of education and also doing the work on the spot. Now, the thing with doing documentation is that founders will tell you, oh, we can download it online. I'll tell you, go and download it online. When the problem comes, do not call my name. Why I can make that claim is that I've worked on these things for long enough that I know the places that you will have a problem. I know the places that you may not, and because I worked in disputes, I know the places that will give problems in disputes. For example, in labor and employment, a lot of lawyers, a lot of startups are hiring people on an ad hoc basis and are using employment contracts for them. But they do not realize that if you use an employment contract and you employ someone, there are tax obligations that you have to meet based on the employment and the amounts that you're paying. So they don't know that. But they'll hand out employment contracts like it's bread. Fine. the day FIRS or LIRS comes for you, I'll just be in my house. And usually, the moment they call you, that is your emergency doesn't affect me. It doesn't make me in a hurry. That's your problem. So you need to know these things and know how to bypass those things and arrange it for your clients in such a way that it meets his purposes. The other thing that lawyers will do for startups is product development. So you are part of the product development. That does not mean that you become an annoying part of the process. You don't just start bugging them. You look at their stuff. You look at existing intellectual property. You keep yourself abreast of what is happening. I'll give you an example. Somebody called me and was telling me he has this brilliant idea. Oh, I said, see, you want to do this, but I know because I read. And it's because I read. I say, you want to do this in fintech, it's good though. It's good that you want to do it. But Facebook just gave somebody 100 million to do the same thing. And the person is in Nigeria. So unless you hurry, how will we do it? So somebody calls you and say, oh, I see somebody in Kenya is doing this and they are doing. Exactly. So instead of you to start afresh, learn their playbook, apply it before they expand to Nigeria, and then expand to South Africa before they get there. Think about your thing. So you need to, like, in the product development stage, you need to have information. Why people will keep you is not because of what you know as a lawyer. They're going to keep you because of other things that you do for them. So product development, you're going to help them. Data protection and right to privacy. Yes. I think T-Babs was teaching me that there's nothing like data privacy. So I'm very careful in putting, it says data protection and then the right to privacy. And you draft the terms of use for their product or for their company or whatever it is that you're working on, and you draft policies like intellectual property policy. There is usually a non-disclosure policy. There are a lot of policies with startup. It depends on what exactly you're working with, and then you will know what you're doing. You'll also do a lot of corporate governance. You're going to explain to them corporate governance and going to help them, especially when they're beginning to raise money and they're beginning to have boards. You are going to teach them how to protect their interests, even with a board. So you're going to teach, for example, I remember the last time I was talking to somebody, oh, you need an even numbered board. You need a board. So that kind of thing, you have to understand why you use an even numbered board. You have to understand these things, because if you don't, your clients will sort of suffer. So data protection, right to privacy, I'll not go into this. Maranatha has talked about this a lot. So you need to keep abreast of these things and follow the NDPR, do their audits at times, do the things that have to be done, give advice, all of that. Intellectual property, you advise on best practices, you register trademarks, patents, protect trade secrets if you can, protect trade secrets in the contract. So Andre was talking about contracts, and that's why I'm saying you should have a 360 view of the company, so that whenever you are doing a contract, you know the things that are falling out from that contract, and you know the things that you have to pack into that contract to make sure that your client is protected. The problem is that the longer your client exists, the more you have work, the more they pay you. Develop an intellectual property policy for the organization, etc. That's for intellectual property. Now, fundraising. This is where the money is. And this is literally money. And this is where a lot of people make a lot of money that they make in fundraising. So you need to understand fundraising generally. So that means you need to understand corporate finance. You need to understand equities. You need to understand debts. You need to understand the tools or the tools that you can use to raise funds. You need to understand you need to have contacts as well as a lawyer. Bring a few contacts. It's not very terrible. Talk to a few investors. Talk to a few VC people. How far? I have a startup. Talk to a few of your friends. Create relationships that can help you or this thing. But beyond that, do legal service. So you have to educate generally, because a lot of startups they have started, they are scaling, they want to get to the next level, but they don't have any idea what fundraising is. They don't know how to fundraise. They talk to other founders. So you introduce them. Oh, you are fundraising, fine. If you're in this sector, I know somebody in this sector that has done something similar. Would you want to talk to him? So you set up a meeting, they meet, they talk, all of that, they learn. In the process, you also talk to him, and you learn. So you draft and you review term sheets, you advise on best practices, you agree with your founder. I think everybody should read about TopTal, TOPTAL. They did, the CEO is, I want to say he's an asshole, but I'm being a very nice person, so I'm not going to say that. So the CEO did a very interesting fundraising model. I think everybody should look at it and see how he topped out TOPTAL, and he actually hurt his investors and all of that. So there is that. He raised, I think the company is currently worth more than $1 billion, more than 100 billion, so thereabout, and nobody holds equity in the company. Not employees, not investors, nobody. Even his co-founder was kicked out without any equity whatsoever. So you need to learn a lot. You need to learn about the contracts that are used for fundraising. You need to learn about safes, convertible notes. You need to know what they mean. You need to know what they imply. You need to know whether they are in the best interest of your client. You need to do due diligence for your clients, investors. If people are coming to invest in your company, you need to do due diligence. There is somebody in the ecosystem that is known to invest in new fintech, like in new companies, and after investing in them, if somehow they refuse, he gives very strict terms, but he's very generous with money. If they refuse, because he has more distribution than them and more leg in the market, he usually does it where a similar product will develop in the next 1 year. And he has that kind of reputation. You need to know these people. You need to know people that EFCC is pursuing. And you need to know if EFCC is pursuing you, does it affect my clients? See, for some people, I'm not very moral with money. I think that money is money. But I usually want to know, see, I understand that your life is shady. I don't really care about your life. I care about my clients. So if you're bringing this money, I will structure that money in such a way that no matter what EFCC does, all that they will catch is you and you alone. Your money and my clients will never get into your business. So you have to know it. You have to know it so that you can protect your clients. You have to understand what exactly the company is all about. You have to understand whether their terms fit you. You have to understand whether their reputation fits the reputation your client is trying to build. You have to understand. You just have to do due diligence generally. I don't know. Just look. Find out what that is. Then a few differences between startups and blue chips. I've talked about startups generally. So startups are not the same thing as blue chip companies. One of them, risk, yes. A good example of a blue chip company, say, let's use Access Bank. If CBN finds Access Bank 100 million today, Access Bank will not really change very much. But if CBN tries it with PiggyVest may not exist by the end of the year. And so if you're working with a startup, you have sort of a higher threshold of duty than someone that is working with a blue chip company. So startups are very highly risky businesses. They have very narrow budgets, they have little money, they have little runtime. They also don't have a lot of government relationships. So as a startup lawyer, your job is to foresee risk and start to quell it immediately. Do not let it come close. See it from afar off. The company, as well as your job, may depend on your ability to foresee risk. For example, do you remember what happened with Thrive Agric and PiggyVest? Who remembers? Thrive Agric failed and was unable to pay. Thrive Agric is an agri-tech company. They get people to invest and they pay returns with interest. And so what happened was that they were unable to pay interest for a long period. They were unable to give returns for up to a year. And so PiggyVest had to pay the people that invested through PiggyVest. Do you understand what I mean? I understand that. So if you're going to do that, you're going to look at ways to look at that thing and how do we mitigate this risk? Do we underwrite these investments? Do we get insurance? Do we use our service as just an API such that do we amend our investment policy so that everybody is DYOR, like do your own research, and if you choose to invest, just invest and know that you're on your own. What should we do? You should be able to understand your client's business and also understand what you're doing and see the risk, possibilities of the risk, and see how to deal with it. Now, another big risk is regulatory.
Zikra, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I mean, you we want to learn a lot from you, but it seems the time is on our side. So they just want to kind of round off. I assume that, I mean, after the presentation, after the session, your slides will be made available to people, right?
I'm almost done.
Okay. Just if you can just
Okay.
round.
No problem. I'm almost done. So there's regulatory risk as well with CBN and their move with fintechs. You need to see how to save your clients all that stress. You really do not want to deal with CBN after they've written their letter. So if you can do it before then, that will be good. If not, that will be okay. So mitigate risk. Do not wait to have to eliminate. Sorry. So another thing with startups is that nobody really cares what you know. So if you're dealing with traditional companies, you write stuff like all these legal opinions, all that. Startups don't have that kind of time. While you should be professional, do not let your professionalism get in the way of solving actual problems. Don't tell us what you know, just solve our problems. Another thing, startups are rich in Jesus' name. Amen. So with a few exceptions, startups are running on vibes and very little money. Always find cheaper, less expensive options for everything. Do not put unnecessary costs on your clients. Do not find things that are expensive for no reason. Just find ways to bypass those costs if it's not affect the quality. So don't get licenses that you don't need. If they're not doing services that require a banking license, don't get a banking license. If they don't do stuff that require an IMTO license, don't spend that 2 billion. Stay within the boundaries. If there's a cheaper option, that's God's plan. Now, on a final, very sober note, 95% of startups will fail within the first 5 years. Just 5% of startups survive the first 5 years. And it's for a lot of reasons, but one of the key things for which they fail is very bad legal advice and very bad legal representation. You're not just a lawyer for these startups, you are sort of everything. You are sort of Superman. So try to look at ways to solve as many problems as you can solve within the law. Thank you very much, everybody. So I think that's all.
Thank you very much, Maranatha. That was a very, very robust discussion. So I think, Rashid, I think we'll be taking questions now. Or Rashid?
Yes, we'll take questions. We'll have general discussions. I think we should just take 1 or 2 questions stemming from the presentations first of all. Then after that, we can take 1 or 2 questions from each person's presentation. Then we can have the general discussions very quickly because we are short of time now. So
Okay. Because of time, there is a particular question. I think that question is for Sage. I'm trying to look for it.
Please confirm if Sage is with us.
Oh yes, I am.
Sage, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I am here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I can quickly go
through
through the questions.
There are 3 actually for you.
Okay, yes, please go ahead.
The first is that one of the requirements for getting a PSSP license from CBN is that a company applying for same has a minimum shareholder fund of 100 million naira. Is the 100 million naira different from the company's share capital? Then the second one is that, did you get that?
Yeah, I did. I got that.
Did you get that?
Yes.
Okay, the second one.
Okay.
I think
no, you just answer.
Just answer this one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because I can see the questions myself.
Okay.
I mean, if you recall the confusion, there was a recently released circular from a month ago, which basically from last month spoke to like the step-by-step process for doing this. But there was an earlier circular in December of. I remember that what that circular actually says is the requirements and then the minimum capital requirements. So anywhere you see actually referring to share capital. So for PSSP, and that's for payment processors, and it's 100 million. And you see the account which you would pay the money to, escrow account, and it is titled CBN PSSP Share Capital
account. So the 100 million, but you must have that actual cash and pay it. So they need that proof of fund. That's that. The next one is whether provision of ATM capital alone. I know I do not think so. Now, if you recall, the other the guy ATM deployment, and in fact, it basically regulates all payment services. It's the guidelines on electronic payment channels, and you see both and independent ATM deployers so can deploy ATMs, but of course you have to apply to the CBN to get. So no, not only banks can deploy ATMs. Then do that. I mean, I would, provided there are some standards that you must have, and you basically would have to apply to the CBN. It's on a case-by-case basis. So the guidelines are that you have to be a fintech. It just says that a corporate organization. So you need CBN approval to do that. Then other question here is on the role of the NIBSS. So essentially, performs quite a number of roles. I mean, the major one is that it performs that role of the central switching company, right? So when you slot your card into a POS or you pay online, the settlement that is the process which your first bank card, when you use it to buy goods from ShopRite, and ShopRite's business is acquired by GTB. So that settlement, and you see approved. What the ATM is saying, give this person value, that is, give the person the goods, and I am going to give you the money date, which is usually transaction date +1, right? So the person who does the back end, that is, for the ultimate settlement, is the NIBSS, which performs switching company. So as the infrastructure for processing, both electronic and physical, that is paper-based check. So it is the primary settlement company. Is owned by all the banks and including, so they perform that central switching company. So they are the ones who make the settlement possible. So when you pay from one and you get the value immediately, the money doesn't leave First Bank's account. It's just saying that pay this guy, his account is funded, I'm going to settle you after all. It is through the NIBSS that the settlement is done, eventually. So when you actually transfer money to somebody, your money isn't leaving your account bank immediately, but it is assurance that when you pay him, you credit as well. So, but the person who does the settlement at the end is then the central settlement, which is the NIBSS. So I don't know if there are any other questions addressed to me. I think that should be everything. Yes. Okay. Yes, of course. They also perform that function to fintechs as well. Yes, definitely.
Thank you very much, Sage. We'll still come back to general discussion. So we'll just quickly take some other questions for the other panelists. So Maranatha, please, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Yeah. So very quickly, we have two questions for you. The first one is someone is asking if you can expatiate on the process for data audit. What do you mean by data audit? What are the requirements, and what is the process like?
Okay. Data audit is just a way of trying to show that you have complied with the provisions of NDPR. Is one of the accountability duties that a data controller or processor has to perform. And some of the things you are required to do there, you'll be made to answer some questions. For instance, did you process any personal data? You have to answer that question. And then, to what extent? Was it up to 1,000, above 1,000, 2,000? Do you have a DPO? You know, that kind of, did you obtain consent before processing? So that type of questions, there is a template for it released by NDPR, and the questions are really much. I mean, the question contains virtually all the principles and other things you are meant to comply, the security measures you have taken, and all that. So that's what data audit is all about. And for the requirement, it has to be carried out by a DPCO who will also verify. I mean, by
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel. Just one very quick question for you. Another question is, you have while you are presenting, I mean, you made very strong points, but you also mentioned things about DPO and DPCO, right? So can you tell us who is the DPO, who is the DPCO, and how can you become a DPO? Can I just walk into the NIC and say I want to become a DPO? What are the requirements? What do I need to have? What do I need to take there? You know, just give us some enlightenment on DPO and DPCOs.
DPO is a data protection officer. A company can decide to get one. His duty is to ensure that the company complies with the provision of NDPR. So he is more or less, will I say, more or less like an in-house counsel. Though the person cannot, it's not possible that, I mean, it's not a must, the person must be a lawyer. And before you can be a DPCO, you have to have a certificate, maybe you must have a CIPP or one of the certificates with NDPR. NDPR has an academy on data protection. So you must have sufficient knowledge, and there must be a certificate for it to show that. Then DPCO is like a law firm, is data protection compliance officer. So you can have a law firm or a tech law firm, and they are just agents of NITDA. They help NITDA to conduct audits with data controllers and processors. So they are the ones to audit and verify that a data controller or processor has complied with the provisions of NDPR. So that's just the difference. Yes.
Okay, Samuel, sorry, just one very resulting question from this. I mean, after this, we'll go to the next question. I'll come back to you again. Now, okay. About DPOs, right? You mentioned it's kind of like an in-house counsel. Do you have to be employed by the firm? Can a firm have a DPO that is not its primary task? I mean, there's no like under a contract of employment with the firm as an in-house counsel or something. Can you be? I know that DPCOs definitely are law firms and all of that, so you can have them on retainers or whatever. But DPOs themselves, do they have to be internal step of the firm, or it can be external? Can just be on a contract or something?
Yeah. It depends on the choice. They can have it as an internal, and then DPR recommended that. Provided they can also, yeah. NDPR recommended that, yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Samuel. We'll move on to Emmanuel now. Lily, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me, Rashid?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so Emmanuel, there is a question here for you, and the question borders on electronic signature. If the clicking of either yes or no to maybe privacy policy on a website, whether it will suffice as an electronic signature. Can you hear me, Emmanuel?
Yes, I can hear you. So in response to that question, yes, it does suffice. The question is actually quite straightforward. If clicking you accept does suffice as an electronic signature, yes, it does. Nigerian laws provide for electronic signature, and insofar as your electronic signature is not contrary to the Cyber Crimes Act, then of course it will be approved. So in as much as you've clicked accept, the main essence of this thing, the main essence of the signature is an expression of intent. So if in clicking accept, it also shows your intent, then why not? The law would deem as though that you have expressly approved. So yes, and you have to understand, due to the nature of most contracts, which are open-ended and for several millions of parties, collating several thousands of different signatures would not suffice. It would be tedious and bulksome. So that is why tech and electronic innovations have come to meet it at this point. So far, yeah, it wouldn't even be a reasonable argument to go into court and say that even though you clicked that you've accepted, that it doesn't suffice as an electronic signature. But even if you did make the argument, it would still be faulty in the very essence of it, because actually it is provided for and it does suffice.
Sorry, I would like to add to that answer as to electronic signature. Section 17 of the Cybercrime Act provides for electronic signature with respect to purchase of goods and any other transaction. And what this provision says is that the burden of proof of this signature does not belong to the purported originator of the electronic signature, but it will be on the contender. So I hope that adds further flesh.
Yes, I think it does. Israel, can you hear me, Israel?
Yeah.
I think it does. When Emmanuel was talking, there was something that came, like on top of my head, I was just thinking about it. That, for instance, there are certain websites, very academic websites in the UK, that when you visit in the UK, and maybe you are trying to do something, maybe they ask you to probably click or accept their privacy policy or whatever. So they will ask you, instead of clicking alone, they may ask you to just type in your name. And I was looking at it that maybe, if at all an argument is made that probably clicking does not suffice as consent, then that would. But from what he said again, I was just able to answer myself on top of my head that, well, it will still be a same argument as to who imputed your name. If you are raising issue as to, okay, yes, I was not the one that clicked it, and evidence is not before the court or anywhere, maybe the tribunal, that I was not the one that clicked it, or even if I clicked it, the clicking is not sufficient. The same thing will apply to where you have imputed your name. But yes, the electronic signature is recognized in Nigeria, and by virtue of that, clicking should suffice. But even looking at the practicality, the concerns that Emmanuel stated about the practicality of getting everybody's signature, it's open to the whole world. So thank you very much for that clarification, Emmanuel.
You're welcome. Thank you so much,
okay,
Emmanuel.
Quickly. Sorry, Rashid. I just want to quickly ask Emmanuel something before he goes, because I noted while he was using the Twitter example, he said something that really stuck with me. He said if you go through Twitter's terms and conditions of usage, right, that you'd realize that Twitter sort of licenses, quote unquote, users to use the platform, right? But everything, I don't know, Emmanuel, if you're there, I don't know, maybe I didn't get you properly, but you said something as regards a user cannot come tomorrow and claim ownership to the tweets. Say, for example, I tweet something from my account, right? So because Twitter licenses the software to me, everything that you do with my account, say I tweet a picture or I post a picture, I make entry or whatsoever, that tomorrow I can't come and say that the tweets belong to me. I don't know if I got that right. Did anybody
more like you are signing whatever IP right that you have on whatever you do on Twitter, it is being assigned, or you cannot claim it in relation to it since you are using their platform. That's it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
yes.
I think so now.
Okay. So the thing is, to be able to answer this, we would have to dive into IP, intellectual property, and the likes of it. So what I was saying is, for you to use Twitter is a software, it's an app. For you to use it, Twitter licenses it to you. You downloading it into your phone and accepting the terms and conditions is basically you saying, I have agreed to use Twitter. So one of the terms and conditions in Twitter is that if you write something, if you make a tweet, now those are words. And now insofar as you can prove that these words that you have made, they are your words. Say for instance, you decide to publish an entire novel on Twitter. So you've decided, okay, you write out your story. Now, those words that you've written out, you have copyrights to them. You can decide to make a book one day. That's yours. It's your story. You have written them. However, if Twitter, after you've made that story, if Twitter decides to publish a book out of those tweets that you've made, you cannot go back and say that, no, Twitter, this is my copyright. Because whilst you are accepting your terms and conditions, one of those conditions were that, okay, that we have rights, that your tweets though you own the copyright, Twitter also, you've also assigned those copyrights inalienable and inexhaustible to Twitter. So not that Twitter is anticipating using your tweets or in future, but they don't want a situation where if an instance comes where they say, okay, these tweets are now worth this amount, and you can't even predict as the world goes. Jack sold his first tweet for about a couple $1,000s, I think. So there might even come a time where you make a tweet and you can sell it. So in anticipation of this, Twitter would like to be sure that they protected themselves copyright-wise. So I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yes, you have, but I'll let every other person ask their questions, then we'll come back to it. All right, Rashid, you can go on.
Thank you very much, Abiodun. Just one very short question for Madam President. Someone is asking this template for tech-related contracts. I mean, is there any way you can find the template or some other things like that?
Yeah, well, in terms of online, there's a site called legalsamples.com, I think. So what that site does, it does help you with clauses and all of that. But in terms of specific and related templates, as much as I can, I always make sure that I share with people. So if you come and you tell me that you need this particular template, and if I have it, I'll share it to you. If I don't, I'll be sure to point you to a resource to where you can find it. Thomson Reuters will help you guide your navigations in drafting, and of course, Google is also an important resource center, insofar as you're not blindly copying or downloading what you see online. So, of course, reach out and I'll say as much as I can help. I'll try and email some to Rashid, and hopefully he'll disperse it to people as they need it. Just the basic ones.
Thank you very much, Manuel. Now, the class presentation kind of spans throughout the entire presentation and the entire topic and everything. And generally, we've not had direct questions from people from the class, although we have some questions that the class might be able to answer. But before I go into that, I would just like to quickly do maybe 2 minutes just to show what the importance of these 4 topics, why they're very important. Now, Whitefish spoke about fintech, and Manta spoke about data privacy and data protection theory. Andre spoke about contracts and contract drafting and etc. Why is the Quora spoke about the role of layers? So I was kind of saying that all these things they're not exclusive. You need each of them to be a complete tech lawyer or a startup advisor. You can't just know just data protection and IP and say you're ready, because you need all of that. Even Andre mentioned IP in presentations, because I found everything. Sid mentioned financing, which is also what the class spoke about. So we say that in starting, there are a lot of things that to consider. If a client comes to you, he wants to process payments, he wants to do 1 or 2, the first thing you need to know the entry requirements. You need to first understand what the client wants to do before you can now know the category that the client falls under. Then you now determine the capital requirements, So you need to understand that. Then when the client starts, you need to know this is what you want to do. These are the data issues that come into the data protection and IP comes in, how to protect customer data. Then now, the client needs money. You need to get people to invest in you, shareholders agreements. People are buying shares, you're doing ETC, NDA, all of that. So your contract and drafting skills come in. And then compliance, financing. How should you should it give equity? Should it give debt? Convertible notes? So you need to be aware of all these things before you can be a complete tech lawyer or fintech or corporate advisor, etc. So I mean, this shows us the importance of these topics that I've spoken about tonight. I'm sure that if you need more explanations on all of this, you can reach out to each of the panelists. I'm sure they're more than happy to take you on and explain to you. I mean, we still have some other questions, but we'll just take one very general question. One very general question for everybody is on this call. I mean, there are people like me that we don't really know much about this. We have learned from the wealth of the knowledge of the panelists. Some people are still in the university, some people are just waiting for law school results. So, I mean, we know that there's a gap. There's a gap between, given that tech generally, it's kind of tech law, it's kind of like a new area, It's not a traditional sector. So it's kind of like a new area to many people, to many of us, even to the practice itself. And so there's a kind of gap between academics, between school study and the practice itself. There's a lot of gap everywhere, but especially in this space, there's a lot of gap. So how can you advise people, young maybe students or new graduates that are interested in creating capacity in this space. How can you advise them in bridging this gap? What are the things they should do probably in their final years, in their service year, to bridge this gap and become closer to this sector, to advising people in this practice? Or what advice can you give to them rather? So the floor is open to the panelists to speak to us about this.
Hello. So I would want to, because you remember, Rashid, I told you I'd have to run. I have to do some housekeeping. So yes, thanks. So and I think I on this. And first of all, we are all just really grappling with the concept in this market. It's not a very developed space, so there are no dinosaurs on tech law in Nigeria like you have for litigation or for banking and finance. So really, this area of law can easily be your claim. Okay? That if you picked up an interest in tech law or data fintech, between now, maybe you're in your final year, you're just waiting for law school results, and in 10 years, you can be as easily lawyer as any of the panelists. I mean, with that level of dedication so I think the starting point for me will be, if you're going to be a fintech lawyer, I like to tell people that really it is not in the concepts are not independent of each other. So because you're a fintech lawyer doesn't mean that you have, for instance, say intellectual property or data protection or banking. So they are so intertwined. Like one of the panelists was speaking about fundraising. I mean, the funding rounds and all of that. So that's private equity. There definitely concepts around capital raising, maybe through debt capital, and then so you find a lot of banking and financing. My approach will be for you to first of all understand the concepts. You want to all aware of what's going on in the industry, so you can start by subscribing to the newsletters like TechCrunch has a very good one. TechCab has a very good one. So you want to be chewing, you want to know who is raising what, and then, so TechCabal is definitely good. So many, Finimize.com is also a very good newsletter. So that's the first. So you need to understand the market, who the players are, who is funding who, and TechCabal and the rest of them, they do that for you. Then the next thing is then understanding the regulation. So if you went on this website today, there is a portion of it that is tagged seculars. So you just put in those keywords, words like mobile money, put in words like electronic payments, or just payments, first of all. That is your Bible if you want to be a fintech lawyer. Yeah, you need to know, fintech regulation is really the lawyer's work. I mean, you're not going to code or develop the application, so you want to read all of those. Data protection is another, and I think the primary law is the Nigerian Data Protection Regulation. So you want to do that. Then, of course, there's also the sponsorship. You want to be a fintech lawyer. Question is, who are those you're following? I mean, panel this closely. You want to read what they are reading. You want to, so sometimes it's not even, it doesn't have to be active mentoring. You can just shadow them. When you go on each of these LinkedIn pages, you start to see the kind of opportunities. Maybe some of them already even applied and got those opportunities. So already, for tech opportunities, if you want to do postgraduate studies. That is also a very big chance or avenue to better your knowledge in fintech, right? So going to a jurisdiction where now there is a very thing. So if, for instance, and I just want to make this point and then I'll wrap up. If to do fintech, you have to be very strategic as to where you'd go to school, right? So if you have very good grades, and it makes more sense to want to go to Stanford than to go to Harvard, right? Because Stanford is, it's in California, if I'm not wrong, and California is home to the Silicon Valley. So you're just one step away from the tech hub, right? So you want to be strategic. You don't just want to rush and go to Cambridge. Like, if your goal is to work with a Facebook or with any of the big tech, you know where headquarters. So you want to be strategic. You want to be, it is what you call nearness to the market. So those are the kind of places you want to go to. And I mean, if you're doing international law, that's why people are going to Geneva, like, you know, so you want to be to the market, the job market for what your area of interest is. So, I mean, if you put all of that, of course, with, I'm sure the other panelists have other tips to add. You should be on your way to tech or tech law. Thank you, everybody. It was really great. But yeah, so you can connect with me and we can take it up from there. Thanks. And this is a great initiative, Rashid. All right. Cheers.
Thank you very much, Paige. I'll assume your tips were very exhaustive, and if some of the speakers are going to add very quickly, we have spent excess of our time. I mean, we are so excess of our time, and I apologize for it. I thank everyone for staying with us up to now. We are going to round up in like the next 5-10 minutes. So if any of the speakers have any one or two other tips to add, then we'll take that and we'll just give some closing remarks, just to
Hi. So I'm going to
Okay.
a few. Hi. So
hello, I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to say a few things. Somebody asked me a direct question about safes, and I wanted to point out that contracts in Nigeria, safes are not precluded by any law as it stands right now. So you can actually use a safe. If a safe is a special kind of contract, that is an agreement for future equity. So it's used in private equity for startups where you hand an investor it's supposed to be a debt note but you don't have shares that are allocated just yet. So you hand your investor something that he has that can be converted to equity when you raise money. So yes, you can use it in Nigeria. But finally, on a general note, what I wanted to say is that as much as passion guides you for what you want to choose, a better thing to guide you is the areas that you can earn from. And I'm very serious about it. It's good that passion is good and all of that. But if tech does not pay you, do not insist that it does. I think that what guides you is usually, do you have clients enough to sustain an interest in this area? If not, there are a lot of lateral areas around. Experiment with them and see what you can do. I think that's what I want to say. So if you are insisting, for example, on data privacy, is good. Data privacy, very beautiful. Data protection, the right to privacy is beautiful. But make sure, do you have enough clients to sustain you in that area? I think that's what I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Zikora. And I would just assume that your extensive explanation with stages, tips, they will cover the field for this thing. I can see Samuel unmuted. Okay, maybe yeah. So I'll just leave the moderators as Larry and Israel to give some closing remarks, and I will just close. I have something to say at the end. So please stay with us for the next 5 minutes, and you'll be on your way to your bed or to go and have a drink, whatever you want to do at the rest of the night. So please, we thank you for the patience. So Israel and Larry, please have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you very much for our gratitude goes to not just the panelists for sharing beautiful insights. We also appreciate the attention and patience and also the time of each and every attendant. We hope you did enjoy this session as much as we did. And please, in case you've not sent your email, please drop your email in the chat box. So the recording of the session can be sent to you. Thank you again for your time. We enjoyed this and we hope you did too. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Did I say something? Okay, so I will just okay.
Just close. I think, I mean, it's enough.
Okay.
Time. Thank you all for
Thank you so much for staying with us tonight. I mean, it really meant a lot, even though we exceeded our time plans. And so I just want to let you know that we've heard a lot of things about corporate finance, raising money, and all of that. The original plan was to be having this every fortnight, maybe 2 weeks or once in a month. So we've been having back and forth about our next topics. We've been considering aircraft finance, corporate finance, project finance, and some other things, PPP, But I think coming from this presentation tonight, we've heard a lot about financing, about raising funds, about all of that. So I think, we'll deliberate on it. I think our next webinar is probably going to be on raising funds, on corporate finance, So I assume some of you might also have maybe some topics you want to learn about, and you might also have people you want to hear from, that you've been seeing this person and we've done a lot of great things in this space, and you like to hear this person speak about this topic. So, I'm always available. Israel is available. Larry is available. Please, if you have any topic you would like to learn about, between now and tomorrow or next tomorrow, you can share with us. If you have specific persons that you would like to hear speak, just let us know. We'll reach out to them. We'll try and bring them here. We intend to have another session in 2 weeks, and because of that, so for now, I think corporate finance is going to have it. Private equity, corporate finance, something like that. We can look something like that. So if you have speakers in this, people in this space that you really like to